fanatic game of the week. That's the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. This game is in Buffalo. The Bills started as a 3-point favorite, I believe. Maybe 3.5. The game, I think it was 3. The game is now, it went down to 2, and the game is now at 2.5. So people have bet the Ravens so far this week. And now, Buffalo is under a field goal favorite, which is fascinating, interesting. So, the headlines for this game. This is arguably the two hottest teams in the NFL right now, like at least in the AFC, right? Tampa Bay might be the hottest team in the NFC from a how they're playing perspective. They continue gradual get better, right? But in the AFC, it's Baltimore, it's Buffalo. They're both playing great football and have for quite some time, at least at the end of the season. I think this game is the game this weekend that shows the greatest value of having a great quarterback. I think both of these teams are not what they are without their quarterback. So Lamar Jackson for Baltimore, Josh Allen for Buffalo. Josh Allen is the Bills' offense, and Lamar Jackson is the Ravens' offense. Without them, these teams wouldn't be nearly as good. Now, these teams both, what makes this game so interesting to me is they both clearly have weaknesses. They're not undisputable, indestructible teams. They both have clear, identifiable weaknesses, and that is the Ravens' passing attack and the Bills' rushing attack. And really, which one can step up and which one maybe performs better will be a huge factor. So I think, the Ravens' ability to pass or the Bills' ability to run just a little on both sides might be a determining factor in this game, which a lot of people aren't thinking about, right? Everyone's thinking about, can the Bills run the ball, or can the Bills stop the run of the Ravens, and can the Ravens stop the pass of, Buffalo and Josh Allen? Obviously, those are the primary factors. But those things could help marginalize the other factors a little bit. Maybe turn the knob, turn the sliders just a little bit towards their favor. In terms of weather, of course, it's in Buffalo, so it's expected to be cold, but not that cold. If you live on the East Coast, this is probably a typical winter day for you. 32 Fahrenheit might be slightly colder, but 32 Fahrenheit, that's not too cold for Buffalo. Likely some wind. Buffalo is known for wind, but I don't think it will be too crazy. I do think that something that's going to be key for Baltimore to have a chance is the fact that they actually played in Baltimore in December, or in Buffalo in December last year. So I know that was last year, and you can't necessarily get your body ready for the cold like that, but still, they kind of know what to expect, and that was with the rowdy Bills fans, right, on their way to the playoffs. So, no fans, okay, so that's a factor. But that was a game last year, 24-17, Baltimore won in Buffalo in December. So it was cold, and that might be something to look at. So mentally for both teams, I think it's also interesting because mentally, both teams are in an interesting spot. Baltimore kind of is in, we just got the monkey off our back mode, and we feel we're just impossible to stop now that we beat Tennessee. We got all the swagger in the world. We're not going down. We are just, we're going to do it now. Like, we've got it. Like, that's where Baltimore feels, because they beat the team that they felt like always beats us, and we got them. Now, Buffalo is kind of on the other side where it's like, ooh, we kind of got by with a win that maybe we shouldn't have won, but we kind of learned how to win in the playoffs. Previously, we haven't really done that. And you got to wonder if Buffalo's kind of still in that phase where maybe they're just not experienced enough to win a big game versus such a good opponent. That's certainly a factor. I feel like teams in the NFL do need to go through a little bit of a learning process before they do win the Super Bowl or get there. Kansas City did it. They lost to New England at home in the AFC Championship. Baltimore did it last year, you got to wonder if Buffalo is this like their time to take a lesson. But maybe it's not. Maybe they took their lesson last year and they now kind of got it. They beat the Colts in a close game. They got by, but we learned how to win. So that's kind of like the mental standpoint of both teams. Now, let's take a look at the tail of the tape, and then we'll dive into the Ravens offense versus the Bills defense. So, the tail of the tape for this matchup. Buffalo's offense, 5th. Baltimore's 9th. Defensively, the Ravens, I feel, are kind of underrated by DVOA because of all the injuries they've sustained this year. Buffalo is 8th, and Baltimore is 15th. Point differential-wise, 165 point differential for Baltimore, which was the best in football. Turnover differential, the same. So, this game's pretty even, I think you could say. Now, let's take a look at the Ravens offense versus the Bills defense. The first thing to note, I think a lot of people are going to look at how the Colts offensive line absolutely bullied the Bills last week. Not actually as much in terms of the run game as you would have thought. Now, the Colts were able to run the ball decent, especially with Nyheim Hines, who broke off some big runs. It was pretty good, but not to the point where it lost the Bills the game. It really was more about the Colts offensive line pass protecting for Phillip Rivers, which was so dominant to me. I didn't really see the Bills get any pressure on Phillip Rivers, who's a pocket quarterback, who's a guy that you have to get pressure after. It's not like a guy you're facing like Lamar Jackson where you're like, oh, we got to contain him, right? So it's different. It's a totally different strategy this week for Buffalo in terms of the passing game and the running game and the resources. A lot of the times you got to look at defense as math, right? A lot of the times the best defensive coordinators are good mathematicians because they're very good with math and kind of determining where are we going to put our resources, or are we going to have this many guys in the box, or are we going to have this many guys defending the pass? And that's kind of the way modern defense is played, is attributing resources to a certain area of the game. And I think you can see that a lot in teams that are good at stopping the run. Teams that are good at stopping the run aren't typically because of their players. Now, some of them are, some of them are not. A lot of the teams that are good at stopping the run are just simply because they put more players into stopping the run than other teams do. Now, the Bills are a team that don't really do that, right? So the Bills are a team kind of like Kansas City, kind of like New England. There's a few teams in the league, kind of like the Rams. And I think there's teams like this that have the defensive linemen that they don't need to try to stop the run, like the Ravens. I think the Ravens last week clearly tried to stop the run of the Titans. That was 100% their goal. But at the same time, they have the players where they can, this week, versus a team that's pass happy, they don't need to try to stop the run even when the Bills will run the ball because they have big-time players. But there's other defenses like the Bills and the Chiefs specifically, and even the Patriots, I would say as well, who kind of sell out to stop the pass and say, running the ball is less efficient, so we're going to let you do that than let you pass the ball. So that's kind of what Buffalo has done all year. So when looking at these stats, I think that's very interesting because there's teams I feel like last year Kansas City was the same. Kansas City last year, while we thought they sucked stopping the run, when they needed to stop the run, they did because they started to put players in places where they actually legitimately could stop the run. Now, why I think it's a little concerning is because Buffalo did play the Colts last week, and the Colts still ran the ball pretty well, even when the Bills kind of tried to stop the run. So as a Ravens fan, you could say, well, they did try to stop the run versus the Colts, and they still really weren't that good at doing it. So now when looking at the math or looking at the stats, I would expect more base defense this week from the Bills than you've seen them play all year. So that means taking a DB off the field and putting a linebacker, putting an extra defensive lineman, getting bigger, getting more beef on the field. I would totally expect that. Now, statistically, PFF ranked Buffalo as the second worst run defense this season. Obviously, that's a massive issue when you play the Baltimore Ravens. Now, another thing to factor from last week is Indianapolis went into Bills territory every single drive that they had the football. Think about that for a second. The Bills defense did not hold the Colts from getting to the red zone on any drive last week. And basically what that game came down to was execution in the red zone. Baltimore 13th in the red zone compared to Indianapolis, which was their ultimate flaw. They ranked 21st this year in red zone execution and scoring touchdowns. Now, I think an area where Baltimore clearly has an edge on both sides of the field is in short yardage and power football. So Baltimore, 5th in power success, which would be runs from 2 yards or less on 3rd or 4th down. Indianapolis, this is somewhere where I feel Indianapolis was slightly overrated this year. So I think a lot of people look at Indianapolis as a matchup for Buffalo last week and say, well, they can really, run the ball super effective. But Indianapolis actually was overrated for their run success, which is a reason I thought Buffalo would actually, in fact, blow them out. I was wrong, but Indy ran the ball better than I thought they would last week. And they were more successful through the air. I think Phillip Rivers was a lot to do with that. He had a great game. But Indianapolis was just 17th in their power success this year. So Baltimore is a next level in terms of running and overpowering you in the run game. Now, explosive run plays is where you could really be concerned if you're a Bills backer here, because the Bills rank 30th defensively in explosive runs allowed, which is 3rd last. That's like big, meaningful runs that break open. Baltimore is 4th offensively in creating explosive runs. And I would believe, I don't know this for a fact, but just by the eye test, I believe with J.K. Dobbins on the field, that has gone up. Now, I think the main priority for Buffalo's defense is their ability to set the edge. I think that's always been the priority when you play Baltimore. I don't think it matters as much who you have in the inside. While it does matter, I think it's more important that you stop Lamar. Like, Lamar is the guy that creates the big runs. He creates the explosive runs. And by setting the edge, that is where Lamar most typically is running, on the edge. So I feel like Murphy and Hughes will be the guys that will be kind of tasked at doing that. Maybe the Bills come out in a different defense that we've previously not seen them run. Maybe they have Milano and Edmonds out there a little bit more than typical. But I think Edmonds will be key to kind of like tracking down Lamar and spying Lamar more than anything. Now, I just think that's the most important thing. Now, when looking at the where the Ravens can potentially run the ball, Baltimore is 9th to the left end running the football, 4.69 yards per carry. They are 3rd to the right end. Most of the time when you think about it, they're great running the ball to the right because that's how Lamar runs the ball, right? So if you're thinking about when Lamar fakes and takes the ball, most of the time it's to the right. If you just watch the Ravens a lot, you would know that, but it's just because of his handedness, I believe. So they're 3rd at running the ball to the right end, averaging 6 yards per carry. Now, the Bills are actually really bad at defending the left side. They're 2nd last, so they allow 5.6 yards per carry to the left, which Baltimore is 9th. Not as good as to the right, pretty good. But Bills, this is where it's interesting. The Bills' defense is actually strong at defending the run to the right. They are 4th at defending the run to the right and 8th to the right end. So just statistically, when thinking about it, the Bills should have success on paper defending the Ravens running the ball to the right, but might struggle running the ball to the left. Now, something I thought of in terms of matchups that would be interesting for Buffalo is, could them playing Cam Newton twice have helped them prepare for the style that they're going to see from Baltimore? Obviously, Baltimore is much better here, with Lamar just being a lot faster in general than Cam. He doesn't provide the power element, but faster. the physicality, the style, the quarterback keeps, the option. Did Buffalo gain enough experience playing Cam and the Patriots for that to help their game in this game? So that's something to think about. Just throwing that out there. The Bills last year, they played last year once again, as I brought up, were the only team to hold Lamar under 200 combined yards. But keep in mind, the key contributors are no longer there. So Star Lotulelei was a big factor. Shaq Lawson was a big factor. Both those guys are not there. So they have different personnel, specifically in the middle, where they're very weak at stopping the run. The Bills have been very weak at stopping the run because their interior players are very bad at it. Okay, Quentin Jefferson, Ed Oliver, and who's the other one? Harrison Phillips is okay. But like their defensive tackles specifically, they just don't have a lot of big people. They don't have a lot of size. So they mostly get beat up in the middle of the field as opposed to their edges where they're fast. They can kind of get to the edge with their linebackers. They're not bad there in particular. Now, when you take a look at the passing game, I think Baltimore is really going to run the ball successfully, but run the ball like a lot. Like, I don't think they're going to have to pass the ball as much as they did versus Tennessee unless the game gets out of hand early to the point where they will have to pass the ball. But even then, I feel like Baltimore is almost more efficient running the ball than passing. I would expect Tre'Davious White to see a lot of one-on-ones on an island versus Marquise Brown. Now, the Ravens have done a better job of getting Marquise Brown the ball at doing things like behind the scrimmage and little like tap passes and things like that to get him involved outside of simply just running routes, versus a good player, because he's not always going to get open versus those elite guys. But that would be the matchup to watch in the passing game, as well as probably Poyer or Milano or some double team on Mark Andrews. That will probably be pretty common when you watch this game on third downs. Mark Andrews will probably be doubled a lot. For Buffalo, when Lamar drops back, I think it is very important that they contain him. Now, I don't think you need to worry about pass rushing here. I think you need to worry about Lamar running. The scramble that he had for a touchdown last week, epic, right? That was a scramble. That wasn't a design run. That was a scramble. You need to stay in your rush lanes. You can't allow him to go past you. Just take your chances at him throwing the ball and him making plays with his receivers. Like, I feel like if you just play straight up when they're passing, if Buffalo can find a way to stop the Ravens to a point where they're in a third and long situation, that is advantage Buffalo, because they clearly have the playmakers in the secondary to match up there. But if Baltimore is consistently in third and short, that is where Buffalo's defense will have a tough time. So that side of the ball is really interesting because it's going to be very old school football. It's going to be grinded out. It's going to be 3 yards here, 4 yards there. Maybe you see the occasional Lamar bust it for 10, 15 yards. I don't think they're going to have a lot of success passing, but I do think Baltimore is going to sustain long, successful drives. And if Buffalo is able to corral them and kind of stop them and get, a couple of 3 and outs in this game, that might ultimately be the difference. I don't think they need to stop them a ton. It just can't be the way that Indy was. Like, Indy was just masterful last week at converting third downs, at, moving the chains when they needed to, but they just didn't execute in the red zone. I think if the Ravens get to the red zone, they're going to score. Like, they are just way too, they have you way outmatched in the running game to the point where Buffalo, they just wouldn't stop them. I don't think. So I think that the Ravens will score. Question is, can Buffalo stop them more than Baltimore can stop Josh Allen? That's the ultimate question. Okay, so let's flip to the other side, where it's the real matchup of this game. So Buffalo's offense versus the Ravens' defense. The Ravens played a totally different style of defense than they typically play last week. So Baltimore, what they did last week was they said Derrick Henry He is not running on us if that is the last thing we do, okay? We are putting all of our big fuckers in the middle of the field, and you are not running on us, okay? And basically, that allowed A.J. Brown to be man-on-man with, Marlon Humphrey, and that was really the only matchup. Like, even though Baltimore played a ridiculous amount of man-on-man, basically zero coverage almost, maybe, cover one, but maybe one safety. Like, that's it. Like, they sold out as much as you can sell out to stop the run. And this week, it's totally opposite. Like, the Ravens' big men, why I felt Baltimore was going to win last week is because they got Calais Campbell and they got Brandon Williams back. This week, their role is the exact opposite of what they did last week. So Calais Campbell, instead of last week focusing on defending the run and clogging up space and holes, this week, he is going to be asked to just push the pocket. Like, I guarantee you, Wink Martindale is probably, instead of being like, yo, Calais, like, you got to be really sound in terms of, stopping Derrick Henry. Like, okay, if Tannehill drops back, we're going to take our chances. But this week, he's going to be like, Calais, don't even care about the run. Like, don't even care about the run. Just push the pocket. So that's kind of the way I see it, is like the big men inside for Baltimore, Calais Campbell, Brandon Williams, Derek Wolfe, and I expect it most of the time to be a four-man front of probably in the inside, Calais Campbell and Derek Wolfe, and then on the outside, Matthew Judon and Yannick Ngakoue. That's what I would expect. I don't think Brandon Williams is going to have a big role in this game. But it's going to be essential that Calais Campbell, he might be the difference. If Calais Campbell can dominate in the interior of the offensive line of Buffalo, that might be the reason the Ravens win the game. If he can create enough pressure where Josh Allen has to scramble outside the pocket and run around. Now, here's something that's interesting. Baltimore has sucked versus Patrick Mahomes. And a big reason because of that really is because they don't contain Patrick Mahomes. They let Patrick Mahomes run around. They don't keep their integrity on the edge. They just kind of rush him like he's a normal Phillip Rivers, right? They rush him, they try to get right to him, and they try to sack him. But every time Mahomes runs around and he buys time and he makes a play, the Ravens need to contain Josh Allen. They cannot just strictly rush Josh Allen. Unless it's third and forever, even then, you would rather him make a play from inside the pocket. Because when he extends it, that is when Josh Allen's going to make a huge play. Like, he might beat you for 10, 15 yards in the pocket within the scheme of the offense. Your goal is to make Josh Allen Tom Brady, because he's not as good as Tom Brady when he's Tom Brady. He's better than Tom Brady when he's Josh Allen, if that makes any sense. Okay? Josh Allen is at his best when he's like Patrick Mahomes. He's not at his best when he's Peyton Manning. Okay? Does that make sense to you? But that is why Matthew Judon and Yannick Ngakoue need to contain the edge, in my opinion. And it's up to Calais Campbell and Derek Wolfe to push the pocket and make pressure from within the pocket. So those guys are absolutely key at making plays there. Now, then you go into something that I think is probably the matchup on this side of the ball, which is the Blitz. The Blitz of the Ravens. Now, we know the Ravens, or at least you probably should know, that the Ravens love to blitz. Wink Martindale is all about the blitz. And something that I found was very interesting, the success of Buffalo, specifically Josh Allen, when blitzed. So let's compare it to last season. Last season, Josh Allen versus the Ravens was blitzed 31 times, guys. You could go back and watch this game. It was an absolute shellacking of like one defensive line dominating an offensive line. Josh Allen, I thought, legitimately was pressured on every play in that game when I think about that game. Last year, Josh Allen was blitzed 31 times. He was pressured 14 times. He was sacked 6 times last year in that game. Sacked 6 times. The question is, can the Ravens do this to the new Josh Allen, to the new Bills offense? That's the question, right? Because when you look at it, the Bills have seemingly being the key word, fixed this problem, right? Josh Allen versus the Blitz has ranked first in touchdowns, first in yards, first in big-time throws. And the Ravens this year remain the heaviest blitz team in the NFL, 30%. So, if the Ravens decide to blitz, does that play into Josh Allen's hand? The stats show us that this year it does. Last year, I think the problem was that they didn't have the receivers to win the one-on-one matchups versus Baltimore. And I think this year they do. So I think it's a bad strategy for Baltimore to straight up just blitz Buffalo. I think that's a bad strategy. I think they need to play more coverage, similarly to how Indianapolis did. But Baltimore has much better secondary players. Probably not as good of a pass rush, right? But with Josh Allen, it's all about, I think, forcing him to run into sacks. Kind of like Mahomes. You need to be creative, up front, stunts and stuff. But I don't think you need to blitz a lot. You can mix it in, but I think he's going to kill you with the blitz because Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, John Brown, Gabriel Davis, these guys can win one-on-one matchups if you decide to play one-on-one on the outside. That's not a good idea. Now, again, guys, I talked about how the Chiefs and the Bills are very similar. Patrick Mahomes lit up this defense earlier in the year for 385 yards, 4 touchdowns, also had 4 scrambles for 26 yards and a touchdown. Something that I also saw, this is how I think, because this is actually, I don't know if it was Sean McDermott or Josh Allen who said this, but Buffalo basically came out and said that Baltimore is the best defense they've played all year. A way that Buffalo could attack Baltimore that I think would probably allow Buffalo their most success is by spreading Baltimore out, similarly to how Cleveland did it, playing 4 receivers on the field at a time. And the stats back this up, okay? The Bills' offense was number 2 in the most dropbacks with 4+ receivers on the field, so 4 or 5 wide. The Ravens' defense against 4 receivers was 21st in yards per attempt, 23rd in explosive play rate, and 26th in passer rating. That's according to Evan Silva. So for the Bills to have most success, they need to spread the Ravens out to scare the Ravens out of blitzing. Okay? And then they need to get rid of the ball. And I think their offensive line, just on a straight up 4 versus 5 matchup, or a 5 versus 5, or a 3 versus 5, can win that matchup. And Allen will be able to buy time and make enough plays to move the football. Okay? The interesting thing to me is how much the Ravens blitz, but still don't give up big plays. Like second and lowest explosive plays allowed. So even if the Bills, have those matchups and the Ravens are playing conservative, it's going to be about the Bills being conservative, throwing the ball underneath, Josh Allen taking his time. And can Josh Allen do that? I think that's certainly a question. We haven't seen him do that as much as other guys like Patrick Mahomes, right? We just haven't seen that maturity as much from Allen. As much as I love Allen, we haven't quite seen it as much. So when looking at the matchups, the final thing here from this side of the ball, this is how I would do it if I was Baltimore. Like if I was the coach, this is how I would do it. So in these matchups, I think I would actually not put Marlon Humphrey on Stephon Diggs. I think a lot of people think Marlon Humphrey is going to be on Stephon Diggs one-on-one. I don't actually see that as the case. Maybe they'll have him and a safety over top, but I believe it will be Jimmy Smith underneath with a safety over top of Diggs. That's what I think. Okay? I think Jimmy Smith is going to be pressing Stephon Diggs and having a guy over top, a safety over top. Marcus Peters on John Brown, on Gabriel Davis, on the other side of the field. And I would have Humphrey covering Cole Beasley. That's my personal opinion. I'd have Humphrey shut down Beasley in the slot, and I'd have Peters on Brown or Davis, and I'd have Jimmy Smith with a safety over top on Diggs. That's what I would do. Because I don't think if you just straight up Humphrey on Diggs, I don't know if that's favorable. And I actually think that means Beasley goes off because I don't think Tramon Williams can cover Beasley consistently. So that's kind of how I would do the matchups if I were Baltimore. And I wouldn't be that, surprised if they did do that. Now, in terms of my prediction, I've kind of said that I think both offenses, I see an avenue for both of them to play to their strength and move the football. I think both teams will move the ball, score points. Both quarterbacks will have good games. I think it will come down to, honestly, red zone, short yardage, third down, all the margins, right? It will come down to all the little things. And whichever team does that better, I think will win. Now, let's go through it. I think the Bills are a better team on third down because I think they're better in the passing game just generally. So I think they can extend drives more. I think the Ravens are better in power football on short yardage. 4th and 1, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 2. Definitely, no question. Now, in the red zone, I think it's pretty much the same. So when I think about it, I just feel like passing the ball, that the Bills will be able to pass the ball more sustainably than the Ravens will be able to run the ball. I think that really is the answer to this game. Like, I think that's the difference. I think Josh Allen's ability to pass with all the weapons he has and spread out the Ravens is the difference in this game. Because I think the Ravens eventually will be stuffed. Like, the running game is just generally less efficient. So at a certain point, the Ravens will get to a point where they need to convert passing the ball. And I think there will be a couple moments in this game where they won't be able to. And then the momentum will sway to Buffalo. So I have the Bills winning the game 30 to the Ravens 24. I would expect this game to go over.